What's going on, guys? It feels like it has been way too long since I've been in the garage turning wrenches. It has been frigid here in Montana. I have nothing but a small space heater in here, but I'm getting a Pioneer mini split this week, so I can't wait to have this space heated. I've been busy planning out the KLX 110 giveaway build, getting merch set up on my website, so lots of great things in the works, but it is time to keep making progress on my KTM 200 build. This thing is still torn down to the frame, and it is time to build this thing back up because I registered for Silver Kings Hard Enduro. Yes, I am planning to ride it on a 200. Come June, I hope I don't regret this decision, so I need to build this thing as badass as possible and start training. So let's jump back into it.
Aside from cleaning up the engine, part of the reason I brought the bike all the way down to the frame is because I want to weld the skid plate tabs on. The frame is actually in pretty darn good shape, but I wanted to give it a good scrub down while it's this far disassembled. I first removed the foot pegs and then scrubbed the frame by hand with a sponge and warm soapy water. I used a toothbrush for hard to reach places and used some super clean degreaser for the greasy spots. I also used DeCal Works Step 1 to remove old adhesive residue. Wintertime in Montana adds new challenges to building bikes as my pressure washer is not an option when it's negative 20 degrees outside. I'm in the process of installing a large tub sink in my laundry room for things like this, but with the frame being so large, the kitchen sink was not an option. This KTM frame got a rinse down in the bathtub. I honestly contemplated just taking a shower with it.
Hopefully this is the only bath this frame takes, but you never know with Silver Kings.
I made quick work of bringing these foot peg pins back to life with Primex cleaning wheels, and as you probably recognize from previous builds, I opted to run some trusty IMS Core Enduro foot pegs. Here is a comparison of stock versus IMS, and you can see they are slightly larger and have better bite. I installed the foot peg pins upside down intentionally, as with hard enduro riding, you tend to drag your pegs on rocks here and there, which if you're unlucky can rip the cotter pin out. I gathered some new washers and cotter pins from my fast metric hardware packs as those needed to be replaced. I ended up using pins that were too long because thickness wise they would provide the most strength, so I just clipped them with some digs and boom, fresh foot pegs installed successfully. While waiting to hear back from my friend about helping with welding, as that's a skill and tool I've yet to pick up, I decided to switch gears to the seat cover, as I think mixing in aesthetic parts of the build during the more dirty parts of the build is a great way to stay motivated and get excited about the project. DeCal Works sewed a beautiful custom seat cover for this bike, and I am really stoked to reveal the complete color scheme, graphics, plastics, and all. And while I say this is an aesthetic part of the build, in reality the ribs on a seat cover do provide increased grip and control, and this is something I absolutely notice when going back and forth between bikes with and without ribs, especially if you're riding when it's wet. This one took me a few tries to get right as I kept ending up with wrinkles, but I took my time removing and restapling different sections until I was happy with the result. Absolutely gorgeous seat cover. I would highly recommend DeCal Works if you're in the market for one. I think with the separation of the black sides and white top, somehow this seat looks more narrow and more modern. I'm really looking forward to putting this on the bike, but there's a lot to do between now and then. So to continue forward progress, I moved on to the suspension teardown. You may recall from the first episode of this series that I bought a set of air forks for this bike, and those are actually on my KTM 350 right now. These forks are from my KTM 350 and have about 90 hours of pretty harsh riding on them. They are certainly due for a rebuild, and the left fork even has a really nasty sticking point about 3 inches into the stroke that was undoubtedly contributing to my arm pump. I noticed my arm pump developing late in the season, which didn't make a lot of sense to me, and then when I swapped the new set of air forks onto my 350, my arm pump vanished. So, along with rebuilding the suspension, I will actually be sending all of the shim stacks out to Daniel Schmidt with DSC Motorsports for a revalve. I've been told that a revalve on air forks can go a long way in their performance, so we're going to have Daniel dial these in as best as possible for some hard enduro riding. Again, I know air forks shouldn't necessarily be the first choice for a hard enduro setup, but in terms of bang for my buck, I only spent $550 on a set of air forks from MX Locker, and they will be a huge upgrade over the stock 2006 forks. Fork disassembly went quite smoothly as I followed along with the KTM service manual, and I did opt to leave the air cartridge assembled. I have been warned that a single speck of dust in that cartridge can completely ruin its performance, and that if it is still functioning perfectly, it is best left untouched. As for the right fork, I did fully disassemble the damper cartridge in order to access each of those shim stacks, being very careful when I slid the shims off each respective rod not to drop or reorder them. I slid them onto a zip tie that would then be sent to DSC Motorsports. I boxed up the fork components and shifted my attention to the rear shock. Check out this sweet shock ring spanner that my brother 3D printed for me. It is about time I invest in a 3D printer, I think. For the rear shock, I actually haven't had any luck finding a full service manual for this specific model, but I figured the main concepts have got to be the same as they are for the 2022 shock, so I still referenced my 350 service manual and was able to get this thing taken apart. This shock was definitely in need of a service. Who knows the last time this thing was taken apart, if ever. It is hard to believe a 2006 shock is now almost 20 years old. I mean, check out the condition of this seal.
Ugh. Nasty.
I have gotten so much better at removing these circlips. I remember it taking me like 45 minutes to get that clip out the first time I ever did a shock. The oil in this thing was seriously gross. You can tell it looks like an old batch of chocolate milk, and I don't even want to describe to you what it smelled like. Long story short, it is really good that we're doing this rebuild. Disassembly from here went well overall, except I apparently still have a thing or two to learn about heat.
Ooh. Wow, that's hot. Sometimes I'm not very smart.
After wisening up a little bit and waiting for the shaft to cool down and putting on some work gloves, I was able to complete the disassembly and remove the shim stack. With all of the suspension components fully disassembled, I packaged a box to send to DSC Motorsports for the revalve. And now, onto the heart of the bike, the engine. I ordered a handful of new parts, which we'll talk about, but first, I needed to take care of this Kickstarter. This thing has been sticky since I bought the bike and requires some force to put it back in the return position. I figure it has never been rebuilt, so I got to work. It became clear quickly that I would strip the head of this bolt without the aid of heat, so I applied some heat with the MAP gas torch and the bolt broke free without hassle. I used prime wheels on the Dremel along with small wire wheels to clean all of the 18-year-old dirt out of these components. The kicker mechanism is pretty simple and uses a ball and spring that compresses and expands when you rotate the kicker. This is what allows it to lock into each 90-degree position rather than swivel freely along the entire rotation. With each of those components cleaned up and re-greased, we've got a nice, functional Kickstarter once again.
He's a smooth operator.
From here, I continued disassembly, of course beginning with draining the oil. I removed the shift lever to improve access for cleaning, as well as expose that shift shaft seal that I plan to replace along with the others. This bike doesn't leak as it currently stands, but I believe these seals are original, and when you're this far in, it just can't hurt to spend 30 minutes and a few bucks on new seals. It looks like this front sprocket ate some rocks at some point, as the case suffered some damage, but thankfully it is entirely cosmetic. I cleaned up the cases with some BioWash and my trusty toothbrush before removing the cylinder. These 12mm base nuts are absurdly close to the cylinder in terms of clearance, and I had to further modify my already modified 12mm in order to make it fit. I conveniently blocked the shot of grinding this down with my other arm, but mission accomplished. With a highly modified 12mm Pittsburgh wrench, the final cylinder nut was free and the cylinder could come off to reveal a piston in really nice shape. There is some carbon buildup on top, as you might expect, but I can't imagine this thing had too many hours on it. Better safe than sorry, especially with a small bore two-stroke. Curiosity got the best of me after removing the piston, as I was just curious how everything else in the motor looked. At this point, I was only a few bolts away from a pretty thorough inspection, so I pulled off the water pump as well as the entire clutch cover, both outer and inner. I saw nothing of concern and proceeded with the clutch replacement. When I pulled the clutch pack, I was also thrilled to find that even the basket has no notching. This bike has either had really good maintenance or really not been ridden that hard in its lifetime, and if that's the case, I hope this bike is ready for what's yet to come. I replaced each of the Kickstarter, countershaft, and shift shaft seals. The first two were easy, but for the shift shaft I had two options. I could have removed the clutch basket to remove the shaft and pry the seal right out, but I didn't have another clutch hub tab washer and didn't really want to wait for one. So I used this method. I drilled small holes in the seal, being cautious of contact to the shaft, and then I was able to pry the seal out and replace it. It's really a pretty effective method, you just have to be careful. I installed the new clutch pack and torqued the pressure plate bolts to spec, and the water pump got new O-rings as well. Again, it can be tough to decide what all to do on a motor that didn't have problems. I'm usually working with old blown up engines, but in this case, I tried to prioritize items for both performance and longevity, like replacing seals and O-rings. For where I plan to take this bike, there's no harm in giving everything a good once-over, even if it doesn't all need to be replaced. I concluded a day in the shop by adding yet another piston to my shelf. We might hit 2 full rows by 2025. I sat down and enjoyed watching AP win in the Premier class for the first time ever. Congrats to the cowboy, and then I resumed progress bright and early the next day. I slept on it, and I decided to Cerakote the ignition and clutch covers black to match the current generation KTM 2-strokes, and figured I would throw the head in too, because what the hell. As it turns out, this thing already had a flywheel weight on it, and I'm now very curious to try it without. That said, I am leaving it on for now as I don't want to change everything all at once. I soaked these parts in a degreaser bath as the first step of the Cerakote process, and in the meantime, got to work on the power valve. It's honestly always fun working on a KTM model that I'm not familiar with, because the designs are always a little different than Japanese bikes, and this power valve is pretty intricate and really cool. One masterfully engineered piece meshes with 3 different gears, 2 that control openings on the sides of the cylinder, and 1 that controls the actual exhaust valve that's the most consistent amongst all 2-stroke power valves. The exhaust valve flap was absolutely caked in carbon. I would be willing to bet this will be the first power valve service of this bike's 18-year history, so we are going to make it count. 2 Cerakoted components out and power valve components into our degreaser bath. I even submerged the cylinder in hot soapy water to help break down old oils and loosen up that crusty gasket that will need to be removed. When I went to begin blasting the parts to be Cerakoted, this happened.
I just lost all power in my garage when I went to turn on the vacuum. That has never happened. What the hell's going on? The vacuum flipped a breaker. Let's see if it happens again. Nope. That was odd. Okay, we should be good to go.
Good to go we were. I blasted the parts, noticing that whatever KTM used to coat these magnesium covers at the factory was absurdly strong. My blast media didn't fully cut through it, which I have never actually seen before with anything I've put in here. But I opted to proceed and see how it turned out given this prep. I loaded the parts into the oven for an hour to complete the gas out phase, and in that time I shifted back to completing this power valve rebuild. After removing parts from the degreaser, I rinsed them in the sink, not to be confused with the sink coming soon, and in this process I scrubbed parts down with Dawn dish soap, which does a really great job at breaking down oils, and this is honestly a prep step, as to not totally contaminate my prime wheels when I use those to break down carbon. And boy, break down carbon they will. I actually found myself wondering as I did this, how did people do this before Prime? I probably put around 20 minutes into these parts to restore them back to almost new condition with Prime wheels. I do have an affiliate link for Prime down below, but I was a customer long before I was an affiliate, and that is for good reason. I actually don't know how I would tackle this effectively without this product. So anyway, check out Prime if you're interested. Cam is a great guy, and it's an awesome business to support. Moving along, I lubricated all of these freshly cleaned components and began reinstalling the power valve. I did make one mistake, realizing that the top arm had to be installed before the flap actuator as it sits in a groove within that piece. Just a couple minute setback and a more thorough understanding of how it works, I'm actually quite mesmerized by this design. Everything moves in conjunction as the result of one arm in the bottom end raising from centrifugal force. The exhaust flap opens as the 2 components on the left and right each rotate 180 degrees to open additional passages for airflow, letting that sweet 200 hit the power band that we all know and love. God, I love 2-strokes. And it's almost like I timed it this way. The engine covers and cylinder head are done gassing out and ready for coating. When I'm not Cerakoting frequently, it's a bit of a learning curve every time, and I didn't clean my gun well enough last time, so I had to deal with some spray issues early on. Ultimately, these components turned out decent, although I quickly realized the clutch cover needed better prep and a lot of imperfections would show through. I'm not overly concerned, but I am interested to see how well it holds up long term, and I should have prepped it with some prime wheels for a better outcome. All this said, the ignition cover and cylinder head actually turned out quite well, and I was excited to install this brand new piston from Pro X. After checking the ring end gap and confirming everything was well within spec as I've come to expect from Pro X, I proceeded with top end installation. The manual suggests using a 0.6mm thick base gasket, and the one that was installed measured 0.75mm, and that is after being torqued down. The Tusk kit came with a 0.55mm and a 0.25mm. I took my chances with just the 0.55, and after measuring the X distance that KTM discussed in the manual, I believe this is acceptable. Ultimately, we are looking for the perfect value, which can be tricky to measure, but too big of a gap means low compression and low power, while too small of a gap means overheating and potential failures. I installed the fresh black cylinder head, and sheesh. For a quick engine overhaul, this thing looks pretty good in my opinion. The intake and reed cage are still coming off, as the intake will need some small mods for the smart carb, so that area will look a little cleaner, but overall I am pretty damn happy and stoked to put this thing back in the frame. I added oil, which I always like to do with the motor still on the bench in case of a leak, and at this point, the fire is fueled for continued progress.
And if you have watched this far and enjoyed this video and have not yet clicked that subscribe button down there, what are you doing? We are approaching 100,000, such an awesome milestone. Love the support in every video. Next episode is gonna be badass. I've got some fresh triple clamps from Jesse Ansley, a brand spanking new wheel set from Urmosi, a 2023 Brembo front brake, and lots of other good stuff coming. I'm doing a 100-hour maintenance and service video on my 350 showing everything you should be doing to your bike after every riding season. The KLX 110 build is starting very soon. I'm working on a highly requested garage and toolbox tour, and those are just a few of many upcoming projects. So do me a favor, click that like button, click that subscribe button, leave me a comment down below and let me know what you think of this build so far, and I will be back with another one soon.